September 27th, 1941. Portland, Oregon. A 41-foot-long cargo vessel weighing over 14,000 tons stood ready at the Oregon Shipbuilding Corporation, preparing for launch into the Willamette River. The ship had required 131 days to complete. By traditional maritime standards, this was already impressive. In the old shipyards of Philadelphia and Baltimore, master craftsmen typically spent 6 to 8 months constructing similar vessels, following techniques passed down through generations. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work, so if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. But something unprecedented was about to unfold across America's shipyards. Within 12 months, that same construction time would fall to 42 days. Within 14 months, a complete cargo ship would stand ready for service in just 10 days. And within 15 months, a single facility would shatter every assumption about industrial possibility by completing a fully operational vessel in less than 5 days. The mathematics were being rewritten, not the mathematics of naval architecture or metallurgy, but the mathematics of production itself. A systematic revolution in how Americans understood manufacturing was about to cascade across every shipyard from San Francisco Bay to Chesapeake Bay. The transformation would prove that industrial capacity was not fixed, that conventional wisdom about production limits could be demolished, and that ordinary workers, given proper systems, could achieve what master craftsmen claimed impossible. The revolution had begun 9 months earlier, on December 27, 1940, when a 58-year-old construction engineer named Henry John Kaiser signed a contract that maritime experts considered absurd. Kaiser had spent 30 years building dams, highways, and bridges across the American West. He had poured millions of tons of concrete for the Hoover Dam. He had moved entire mountains to construct the Grand Coulee Dam. He understood earth, steel, concrete, and logistics. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. But Henry Kaiser had never built a ship. He had never managed a shipyard. He had never studied naval architecture. Yet here he stood, having just promised the United States Maritime Commission that his company would construct 30 cargo vessels for the British government within 2 years. The Todd Shipyards Corporation, one of America's oldest and most respected maritime firms, had reluctantly agreed to partner with Kaiser on the project. The established shipbuilders assumed their decades of expertise would compensate for his obvious ignorance. What none of them understood was that Kaiser's complete lack of shipbuilding experience would become his most powerful advantage. Among those watching Kaiser's entry into shipbuilding was Vice Admiral Emory Scott Land, chairman of the United States Maritime Commission. Land was a career naval officer who had graduated from the Naval Academy in 1898. He had spent 4 decades in and around ships. His private correspondence, preserved in the National Archives, revealed the maritime establishment's reaction to Kaiser's audacious proposal. The man has built dams and roads. Ships are not dams. Ships must float. Ships must withstand North Atlantic storms. Ships carry our food, our fuel, our very survival. Kaiser proposes to revolutionize methods unchanged since the days of wooden sailing vessels. This is either genius or catastrophic hubris. Time will reveal which. Yet Land also recognized desperation. By early 1941, German submarines were slaughtering Allied merchant shipping across the Atlantic. The statistics were horrifying. In 1940 alone, German U-boats and surface raiders had sent over 3.6 million tons of Allied shipping to the ocean floor. Britain was literally starving. Convoys arrived in Liverpool and London with holds half empty because so many ships never completed their voyages. American shipyards using conventional methods required an average of 230 days to build a single cargo ship. At that pace, the Allies would lose the Battle of the Atlantic years before American industrial capacity could respond. Britain would collapse. Germany would control all of Europe. The decision to approve Kaiser's contract represented not confidence in his methods, but acceptance of mathematical reality. Traditional approaches were failing. Something radical was required. Kaiser selected Richmond, California, as the site for his first major shipyard. Richmond in 1940 was a modest city of 23,000 people, situated on the eastern shore of San Francisco Bay, directly across from San Francisco itself. The location offered deep water access, proximity to rail lines, and vast stretches of undeveloped shoreline, perfect for industrial expansion. Construction began in December 1940, on land that had been farmland weeks earlier. Kaiser's construction crews, experienced in building massive dams and highways, erected a shipbuilding facility that shocked traditional maritime engineers. Instead of the longitudinal building ways and massive gantry cranes that characterized established shipyards like those in Philadelphia or Brooklyn, Richmond featured something entirely different. The yard was laid out like an automobile assembly plant. Open fabrication areas surrounded multiple parallel building ways. Railroad tracks crisscrossed the entire facility, designed to move massive steel sections weighing up to 150 tons. Overhead cranes, capable of lifting entire ship sections, stood every 100 feet, their lifting capacity far exceeding what any traditional shipyard considered necessary. John Riley, chief naval architect for Bethlehem Steel Corporation and a 30-year veteran of ship construction, visited the Richmond yard in May 1941, while the facility was still under construction. His confidential inspection report contained equal parts technical criticism and reluctant fascination. Kaiser has violated every principle of efficient shipyard layout I learned in 3 decades. His fabrication areas are absurdly large, wasting valuable waterfront footage. His crane capacity exceeds any rational requirement. His building ways are too short for proper sequential construction. Yet, I must admit, the facility appears designed for exactly what he claims: rapid assembly of prefabricated sections, rather than traditional keel-up construction. If his methods work, we will all look quite foolish. If they fail, he will have wasted millions in taxpayer money. The workforce arriving in Richmond through summer and fall of 1941 represented another revolutionary departure from shipbuilding tradition. Traditional shipyards recruited from established maritime communities, skills passed from father to son across generations. A master riveter might train for 4 years as an apprentice before working independently. A ship's carpenter required a decade to master the craft. A marine electrician needed years of experience across multiple vessels. Kaiser advertised in newspapers across America. He offered wages 20% above standard industrial rates. He promised to train anyone willing to work. The only requirements were showing up on time and following instructions. The first groups arrived in Richmond in August 1941. They came from farms in Oklahoma. They came from failed businesses in Nevada. They came from factories in Detroit. They came from high schools in Los Angeles. Very few had ever seen a ship under construction. Almost none understood naval architecture or marine engineering. By October 1941, Kaiser employed over 10,000 workers in Richmond. Fewer than 200 possessed any previous maritime experience. This workforce composition terrified traditional shipbuilders. How could secretaries and farmers possibly construct seaworthy vessels capable of crossing the North Atlantic in winter storms? Kaiser's answer was systematic task simplification. Traditional welders spent 4 years learning comprehensive skills that allowed them to work anywhere on any ship in any position. Kaiser's training instructors taught specific techniques for specific tasks in approximately 2 weeks. A worker didn't need to know how to weld everything. They only needed to know how to weld vertical seams on bulkheads, or horizontal deck plates, or curved hull sections, whichever task they would perform repeatedly, hour after hour, day after day. The simplification borrowed directly from Henry Ford's assembly line revolution in automobile manufacturing. Ford had proven that complex products could be manufactured by workers performing simple, repetitive operations. Each worker mastered one task. The product moved past the worker. The worker performed their specialized operation. The product moved to the next worker. Kaiser applied this principle to shipbuilding with religious conviction. Clay Patrick Bedford served as Kaiser's chief engineer and general manager of the Richmond yards. Bedford was a construction veteran who had worked with Kaiser on the Grand Coulee Dam project. He understood logistics, workflow optimization, and the systematic organization of large-scale projects. Bedford had visited a Ford Motor Company assembly line in Detroit in early 1941. He had watched automobile chassis moving down production lines with workers installing prefabricated components at each station. He returned to California convinced that ships could be built identically. The traditional shipbuilders considered this comparison absurd. Ships and automobiles were fundamentally different. Automobiles weighed 2 tons. Ships weighed 14,000 tons. Automobiles had 5,000 components. Ships had tens of thousands. Automobiles operated on roads. Ships operated in the hostile environment of the open ocean, where a single weld failure could sink an entire vessel and kill its crew. Yet Bedford saw past the differences to recognize the underlying similarities. Both were mechanical assemblies constructed from numerous components. Both required those components to fit together precisely. Both could be built more efficiently through standardization, prefabrication, and systematic assembly sequences. The first real shock to the maritime establishment came with Kaiser's proposal to eliminate riveting entirely. Traditional ship construction relied completely on rivets. These were heated metal pins that were driven through overlapping steel plates to join them together. Working with perfect coordination might install perhaps 100 rivets per day. Each Liberty ship required approximately 1 million rivets if built conventionally. The mathematics were brutal. 1 million rivets at 100 per day meant 10,000 crew days of riveting work alone. Kaiser proposed using electric arc welding instead. This was a technique he had mastered building pipelines and dams across the American West. A trained welder using electric arc equipment could join steel plates in minutes rather than hours. The joints were stronger than riveted connections. The process required fewer workers, and critically, welding could be learned in weeks rather than years. Vice Admiral Land examined Kaiser's welding proposal with profound skepticism. His response captured the maritime establishment's resistance. Welding has never been proven reliable for hull construction at this scale. The British Royal Navy explicitly forbids welding on warship hulls, preferring a traditional riveted construction. Kaiser is proposing we bet America's supply lines on an unproven technology. Yet Land also recognized mathematical necessity. At conventional production rates, America would require decades to build enough ships to replace wartime losses. The decision to approve Kaiser's welding approach represented desperate pragmatism rather than confident innovation. By November 1941, component production was underway across multiple facilities. The design Kaiser would build was called the EC-2 for emergency cargo, Type 2. The Maritime Commission had adapted it from a British cargo ship design dating to the late 19th century. The vessel was deliberately simple, deliberately ugly, deliberately basic. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, a lifelong yachtsman and former Assistant Secretary of the Navy, saw preliminary drawings and called them dreadful-looking objects. He wasn't wrong. The EC-2 featured a boxy hull, a tall central superstructure, and minimal aesthetic consideration. Function dominated every design decision. These ships were tools, not art. They would carry cargo. They would cross oceans. They would, hopefully, arrive intact. Nothing else mattered. The Maritime Commission's publicity department recognized that emergency cargo Type 2 lacked inspirational appeal. They needed a name that would capture American imagination and generate public support for the massive construction program. Someone suggested Liberty ships. The name stuck. These would be the ships that carried liberty to Europe, the ships that would keep Britain alive, the ships that would transport American power across the Atlantic and Pacific. The first Liberty ship completed anywhere in America was the SS Patrick Henry, launched at the Bethlehem Fairfield Shipyard in Baltimore, Maryland, on September 27, 1941, the same day the SS Star of Oregon launched in Portland. Both ships required over 130 days to both construct. By maritime standards, this was already impressive acceleration, but Kaiser was just beginning. As workers gained experience through late 1941 and early 1942, something remarkable occurred. Construction times began falling dramatically, not gradually. Kaiser's first Liberty ship required 197 days from keel laying to delivery. The second required 169 days. The fifth required 128 days. The 10th required 97 days. By spring 1942, Richmond was completing Liberty ships in 70 days on average. Traditional shipyards watched with growing alarm. This untrained workforce of former farmers and housewives was achieving production speeds that matched their own highly skilled crews. The prefabrication approach that traditional builders had dismissed was proving devastating effectiveness. Instead of building ships from keel to deck in sequence, Kaiser's yards fabricated entire sections simultaneously across the facility. While one crew assembled a bow section in the prefabrication area, other crews in different parts of the yard built stern sections, deck houses, engine rooms, and bulkheads in parallel. When sections reached completion, massive cranes lifted them onto the building ways, where welding crews joined them together. Albert Wooding, production supervisor at Richmond Yard No. 2, explained the efficiency in a 1943 interview with Fortune magazine. In traditional shipbuilding, you cannot install the engine until the engine room exists. You cannot build the engine room until the hull reaches that stage of completion. Everything happens sequentially, one step depending on the previous step. Kaiser's approach allows true parallel production. While one crew welds hull plates together, another crew assembles the complete engine in a separate facility. When both reach completion, we use cranes to drop the completed engine into the completed engine room and weld it in place. Tasks that previously required weeks now require hours. The statistics of parallel production revealed manufacturing efficiency that seemed impossible to traditional builders. A conventional shipyard might assign 50 workers to install an engine over 3 weeks, working in the cramped confines of a partially complete engine room. Kaiser's prefabrication method assigned 200 workers to assemble the complete engine and its mounting structure in an open workshop over 5 days, then used massive cranes to position the entire assembly in a single 8-hour operation. Even more disturbing to traditional maritime authorities was the casual elimination of centuries-old shipbuilding practices. Ships had always been built from carefully drafted plans that specified every detail down to individual rivets. Kaiser used simplified drawings that provided basic dimensions and left details to workers' judgment. Traditional builders considered this recklessness. Kaiser called it flexibility. The transformation from skepticism to acceptance was captured in Vice Admiral Howard Vickery's Evolution. Vickery served as vice chairman of the Maritime Commission and was responsible for production oversight across all American shipyards. His meeting minutes documented his journey from resistance to reluctant admiration. In January 1942, I opposed Kaiser's request to reduce drawing specifications. Ships are not automobiles. Maritime construction requires precision. Engineering drawings must specify every detail. But by March, Kaiser's yards were outproducing our traditional contractors by 40%. By June, the gap had widened to 70%. I learned a painful lesson. Perfection is the enemy of sufficient. Kaiser's ships were not beautiful. They were adequate, and adequate ships delivered more cargo than perfect ships still under construction. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. As construction speeds increased through spring and summer 1942, competition developed among Kaiser's multiple shipyards. His son, Edgar Kaiser, served as vice president and general manager, overseeing all Kaiser shipyards, with particular focus on the 3 Pacific Northwest facilities. Edgar managed the Oregon Shipbuilding Corporation in Portland. Clay Bedford oversaw the Richmond yards in California. Both men were driving, ambitious, and intensely competitive. The race between Richmond and Portland became a public spectacle through fall 1942. Newspapers published updates like sports scores. Edgar's 10th ship at Portland, the SS Robert Fulton, took 154 days to build. By April, the number had been cut to 86 days. By July, hull number 230 was finished in just 43 days, breaking Clay Bedford's 50-day goal that he had set for Richmond. Then, on September 23, 1942, Edgar's team at Oregon Shipbuilding completed the SS Joseph N. Teal in just 10 days from keel laying to launch. 10 days. A complete cargo ship, 14,000 tons, 41 feet long, ready for service. The achievement made headlines across America, but it also triggered Clay Bedford's competitive instincts. Workers arriving at Richmond Yard No. 2 the following Monday found a flyer in the company newsletter that asked a simple question. What's Oregon got that we haven't got? Bedford had a plan. He would cut Edgar Kaiser's record in half. Vice Admiral Land, visiting Richmond to inspect production in early November 1942, made an offhand comment to journalists that was overheard by Bedford. The Admiral remarked that Liberty ship construction had improved remarkably, noting the recent 10-day record. But he observed that even this still paled compared to what mass and production had achieved in other industries. Bedford took the comment as a direct challenge. He proposed to Vice Admiral Land that Richmond Yard No. 2 would build a complete Liberty ship from keel laying to launch in under 5 days. 5 days for a 14,000-ton vessel, 50% faster than the existing record. Land was skeptical but intrigued. He authorized the attempt on one condition. The record attempt must not disrupt regular production schedules. The other ships being built simultaneously must maintain their timeline. Bedford selected hull number 4 to 7 for the record attempt. The ship would be named SS Robert E. Peary after the Arctic explorer who had reached the North Pole in 1909. The prefabrication strategy reached its ultimate expression during the Peary's construction. Every major component had been built, inspected, tested, and staged before the keel touched the building way. The bow section, comprising more than 50 individual pieces, had been fully welded and equipped with anchor hardware, chain lockers, and forward crew quarters before final assembly began. The stern section included the completed steering gear, propeller shaft, and aft crew spaces, 4 complete cargo holds, each one a massive rectangular structure of welded steel plates, waited to be lifted into position. The engine, a 140-ton triple-expansion steam power plant built by Joshua Hendy Iron Works in Sunnyvale, California, had been mounted on its foundation structure and tested before leaving the factory. Where conventional shipyards built from keel to deck over months, Kaiser's yards were preparing to assemble a nearly complete ship from prefabricated sections in days. November 8, 1942, 1 minute past midnight, Sunday morning, Richmond Shipyard No. 2. Over 1,000 workers, operating in carefully coordinated shifts, began what many considered impossible. The keel section was positioned on the building way. Within hours, the first major components began arriving. Massive cranes lifted bow sections weighing dozens of tons. Welding crews swarmed over each connection point. The building way became a choreographed industrial ballet. Components arrived exactly when needed. Cranes moved with mechanical precision. Welders worked in 3 shifts, never stopping, never pausing. Monday morning, the basic hull structure was complete. Tuesday, the deck houses were positioned and welded. Wednesday, the engine was installed, a process that in conventional yards might require 3 weeks. The entire power plant was lifted by crane and lowered into the completed engine room, then welded into place in a single shift. Thursday afternoon, November 12, 1942, 3:30 p.m. Just 4 days, 15 hours, and 29 minutes after the keel touched the building way, the SS Robert E. Peary slid down the launching rails into San Francisco Bay. The ship was delivered for full service on November 15th, setting an additional record of 7 days, 14 hours, and 32 minutes from keel laying to complete delivery. The crowd of observers that day included Vice Admiral Land, maritime officials from across the country, military officers, competing shipyard owners, and journalists from every major American newspaper. Many had arrived expecting to witness either spectacular failure or a compromised vessel that looked complete but lacked true functionality. What they saw instead was a fully operational ship requiring only minor fitting out before entering convoy service. Vice Admiral Land made brief remarks that were recorded by newsreel cameras. His words captured the maritime establishment's forced recognition that everything had changed. 6 months ago, I would have called this impossible. Traditional shipbuilding wisdom accumulated over 3,000 years said you cannot build a proper ship in 5 days. Kaiser has made traditional wisdom obsolete. The United States Maritime Commission will now require all contracted shipyards to adopt these methods. The psychological impact on traditional shipbuilders was profound and immediate. The same yards that had dismissed Kaiser as an ignorant outsider just 18 months earlier now sent engineers to study his approaches. The president of New York Shipbuilding Corporation, one of America's oldest and most prestigious yards, visited Richmond in December 1942. His confidential report to his board of directors revealed complete ideological collapse regarding traditional approaches. Kaiser has achieved what our industry considered impossible by refusing to accept our limitations. He treated shipbuilding as a manufacturing problem rather than a craft tradition. He simplified where we sought perfection. He standardized where we customized. He trained masses of unskilled workers where we cultivated generational expertise. The result is ships built in 1/10, the time at 2/3 the cost. We must either adopt his approaches or accept irrelevance. By early 1943, Kaiser's influence had transformed American maritime production completely. 18 shipyards across the country were building Liberty ships using prefabrication and welding. Average construction time had fallen from 230 days initially to just 42 days by mid-1943. The United States was launching 3 Liberty ships daily, more tonnage than German submarines could sink. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. But perhaps the most devastating challenge to traditional maritime authority came from the composition of Kaiser's workforce. The tens of thousands of women, minorities, and untrained workers who had built these ships represented a direct repudiation of the old guild system that had dominated shipbuilding for centuries. At peak production in summer 1944, Kaiser's 7 yards employed approximately 196,000 workers. The demographics of this workforce would have been unthinkable just 3 years earlier. Women comprised 27% of the Richmond shipyard's production workforce by mid-1944. The 3 Northwest Kaiser yards alone employed over 31,000 women by 1944. In Richmond specifically, approximately 24,500 women worked across the 4 shipyards at peak production. In February 1943, women comprised 13.7% of all production workers at Richmond, including 40.7% of all labourers, 37.1% of boilermakers, 19.4% of welders, and 18.8% of burners. These women were not performing auxiliary roles. They were welding hull plates. They were operating massive cranes. They were cutting steel with acetylene torches. They were fitting sections that weighed tons. Supervisors quickly discovered that women often made superior welders. Their attention to detail, their patience, their steady hands produced cleaner, stronger welds than many male workers achieved. The Richmond yards technically employed Wendy the welders rather than Rosie the riveters, because Kaiser's facilities used welding instead of riveting. But the broader cultural icon of Rosie the Riveter, popularized by Norman Rockwell's famous Saturday Evening Post cover in May 1943, came to represent all women in wartime industrial work. African-American workers numbered in the tens of thousands across Kaiser's facilities, employed in skilled positions, including welding, fitting, crane operation, and even supervisory roles. This represented a level of workplace integration unusual for 1940s America. The black population of Richmond grew from 270 in 1940 to approximately 10,000 by 1945. Kaiser recruited actively across America. Special trains moved would-be employees from eastern states to the West Coast. The city of Richmond swelled from 23,000 people in 1940 to over 100,000 by 1943. Housing became desperate. Private homes rented spare rooms. Hotbeds emerged, where 3 workers on different 8-hour shifts would sleep in the same bed at different times. Kaiser built Vanport City in Oregon to house shipyard workers. Vanport briefly became Oregon's second-largest city, with a population exceeding 40,000, all of whom worked in shipyards or supporting industries. These boomtowns demonstrated the transformative effect of concentrated industrial investment. The democratization of skilled work that Kaiser enabled carried implications far beyond wartime production. By proving that complex manufacturing could be performed by trained workers rather than requiring generational craft expertise, Kaiser's shipyards challenged fundamental assumptions about labor, skill, and industrial organization. The production statistics by mid-1944 revealed the full scope of Kaiser's achievement. His 7 yards had produced over 800 Liberty ships, but the influence of his approaches extended far beyond his own facilities. The 18 American shipyards building Liberty ships had collectively produced 2,400 vessels by this point. Victory ships, a larger and faster design that supplemented Liberty production from 1944 onward, were built using the same prefabrication and welding techniques. The total American maritime production between 1941 and 1945 exceeded 5,500 vessels, representing approximately 53 million tons of shipping. The scale of production staggered contemporary observers and remains impressive by modern standards. Commander Joseph Kenworthy of the Royal Navy, assigned to the British Admiralty delegation in Washington, watched American production with admiration and envy. His official reports to the Admiralty, declassified in the 1980s, captured the British perspective on American industrial dominance. The United States is building merchant shipping at a rate that exceeds the combined capacity of the rest of the world. Kaiser alone produces more tonnage monthly than the entire British shipbuilding industry. The approaches are crude by Admiralty standards. The ships are inelegant, but they float, they carry cargo, and there are thousands of them. The Royal Navy built the finest warships in the world using traditional craftsmanship, requiring years per vessel. The Americans build adequate ships in weeks. Adequate multiplied by thousands defeats perfection multiplied by dozens. The battle casualty rates among Liberty ships demonstrated their effectiveness, despite initial skepticism about rapid construction approaches. Of 2,710 Liberty ships built, approximately 200 were lost to enemy action, a loss rate of 7.4%. This compared favorably with pre-war merchant shipping loss rates, and proved that welded construction, while initially suspect, produced seaworthy vessels. Some ships experienced structural failures due to welding defects. 3 Liberty ships broke completely in half due to brittle fracture problems, representing 0.1 to 1% of production. Nearly 1,500 instances of significant brittle fractures occurred across the Liberty fleet, but catastrophic complete breaks were rare. These failures led to improved welding procedures and steel specifications that eliminated the problem by 1944. Longevity statistics provided the ultimate vindication of Kaiser's construction approaches. Liberty ships designed as emergency, vessels with expected service lives of 5 years, proved remarkably durable. Many remained in service for decades after the war. The SS John W. Brown, built in Baltimore in 1942, remains operational as a museum ship as of 2025, 83 years after construction. The ship completed its original construction in just 54 days. It required about 500,000 man-hours and cost $1.7 to $5 million to build. After serving throughout World War II as both a cargo ship and troop ship, the John W. Brown was preserved and now offers living history cruises in the Chesapeake Bay. The SS Jeremiah O'Brien, built in South Portland, Maine, in 1943, is preserved in San Francisco and remains the only Liberty ship in completely original, unaltered, and fully operational condition. In 1994, 50 years after D-Day, the Jeremiah O'Brien actually sailed to Normandy under its own power to participate in 50th anniversary commemoration. The crew for this epic voyage consisted of World War II veterans, whose average age was 70, along with a few cadets from the California Maritime Academy. Of the approximately 2,510 Liberty ships that survived the war, approximately 835 remained in commercial service through the 1960s. Many were sold to foreign shipping companies where they operated into the 1970s. The SS Albert M. Bow, the last Liberty ship built and delivered on October 30th, 1945, was converted into the fish cannery ship Star of Kodiak in 1965. It remains today as the landlocked headquarters of Trident Seafoods in Kodiak, Alaska, still in existence 8 decades after construction. The economic impact of the Liberty ship program extended across American industry. The massive steel requirements drove expansion of steel production capacity, particularly on the West Coast, where Kaiser built the Fontana steel mill specifically to supply his shipyards. This mill, completed in 1942, 5 months ahead of schedule, produced approximately 700,000 tons of steel annually, and established California as a major steel-producing region for the first time. Healthcare innovation emerged as an unexpected legacy of Kaiser's shipbuilding program. To provide medical care for his massive workforce, Kaiser partnered with physician Sidney Garfield to establish prepaid healthcare programs. In August 1942, Kaiser Richmond Field Hospital opened, financed by the U.S. Maritime Commission, and run by Garfield, with a staff of 6 medically deferred physicians and 6 nurses. The program was wildly successful. Workers and their families received comprehensive health care through matching contributions from their paychecks. As the wartime workforce began shrinking later in the war, Kaiser transitioned the healthcare component into a multi-time course, separate, private entity. He named the new company Kaiser Permanente, and it evolved into one of America's largest health maintenance organizations, serving over 12 million members by the early 21st century. The workers themselves carried forward the lessons of the wartime experience into decades of peacetime achievement. The shipyards gave thousands of young people, especially women and minorities, opportunities to develop capabilities they would never have accessed through conventional career paths. Those opportunities opened doors that stayed open for the rest of their lives. The technological innovations developed during the Liberty ship program influenced industries far beyond maritime construction. The welding techniques refined under wartime pressure became standard in structural steel construction, petroleum refining equipment fabrication, and pressure vessel manufacturing. The prefabrication approaches pioneered at Richmond influenced construction practices in housing, bridge building, and industrial facilities. The organizational principles of parallel production, simplified specifications, and rapid worker training became foundational concepts in operations management and industrial engineering education. Professor Michael Porter at Harvard Business School, analyzing American industrial competitiveness in a 1985 study, identified the Liberty ship program as a crucial case study in rapid capability development. Kaiser demonstrated that industrial capacity is not fixed, but can be created quickly when necessity demands it. The United States entered World War II with minimal merchant shipbuilding capability. Within 24 months, American yards were producing more tonnage than the rest of the world combined. This proved that industrial infrastructure, workforce skills, and production systems could all be developed at unprecedented speed when properly organized. The psychological transformation that the Liberty ship program created among industrial managers and engineers proved as significant as the physical ships produced. Before Kaiser, manufacturing executives accepted conventional wisdom about production limits, skill requirements, and organizational structures. Kaiser demonstrated that conventional wisdom could be wrong, and that breakthrough performance required questioning fundamental assumptions. The prefabrication techniques, welding procedures, and parallel assembly approaches that Kaiser pioneered became standard practice in global shipbuilding. When Japan and South Korea rebuilt their maritime industries in the 1950s and 1960s, they studied Kaiser's Liberty ship program and adopted his approaches as the foundation of their yards. The massive shipbuilding facilities in Ulsan, South Korea, and Nagasaki, Japan, that would dominate world shipping construction for decades, were direct descendants of Richmond shipyard's revolutionary practices. John Bunker, professor of maritime history at the State University of New York Maritime College, summarized Kaiser's lasting influence in his definitive study published in 1972. Kaiser entered shipbuilding as an outsider, ignorant of maritime tradition, unconstrained by conventional wisdom, and willing to apply manufacturing principles that the established industry considered inappropriate for ship construction. In 36 months, he built more ships than had been constructed in America during the entire previous century. More importantly, he fundamentally altered how ships would be built worldwide for the remainder of the 20th century. Admiral Chester Nimitz, commander of the Pacific Fleet, reflected on the strategic impact of American maritime production in his post-war memoir published in 1960. "We fought across 5,000 miles of Pacific Ocean, supplied by ships built faster than the enemy could sink them. Japan's military planners assumed American industrial capacity was impressive but finite. They believed that if they sank enough ships, eventually American logistics would collapse and we would be forced to negotiate. They failed to account for Henry Kaiser. By 1944, we were replacing shipping losses faster than they could inflict them. The mathematics of attrition favored the side that could build 3 ships daily over the side that could sink 2 ships daily. Industrial capacity, not martial valor, determined the outcome. Liberty ship production ended in September 1945, with the conclusion of World War II. By December, Kaiser's workforce had fallen from 200,000 to fewer than 20,000. The Richmond shipyards that had employed 100,000 workers at their peak stood largely empty by spring 1946. The 4 Richmond yards closed permanently in 1946. Most traces of these facilities have vanished, yet the knowledge developed during the emergency program did not disappear. The modular construction, prefabrication, and welded assembly that Kaiser pioneered are now universal standards. Every modern shipyard, whether building container vessels in Korea, oil tankers in Japan, or cruise ships in Europe, uses approaches derived directly from Kaiser's Liberty ship program. Today, the Rosie the Riveter World War II Homefront National Historical Park stands on the site of the former Richmond shipyards. Dedicated in October 2000, the park preserves and interprets the legacy of America's home front during World War II. The memorial, designed to resemble a ship's hull, honors the workers, especially women and minorities, who built the vessels that carried victory across oceans. The SS Red Oak Victory, the last Victory ship built in Richmond and launched in November 1944, is preserved near the original Yard No. 3 site. Visitors can tour this fully restored vessel and experience what these emergency cargo ships were like. The story of how one civilian's approach made Liberty ships appear in days instead of months is ultimately a story of transformation through demonstration. It proves that the greatest revolutions often come from those unconstrained by tradition, that progress requires questioning accepted limits, and that human potential exceeds conventional expectations when properly organized and challenged. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe. Kaiser's workers were not superior humans. They were ordinary people, achieving extraordinary results because someone believed they could and organized systems that allowed them to prove it. That lesson, demonstrated in the shipyards of Richmond and validated by 2,710 completed vessels, remains relevant wherever industries face challenges that conventional wisdom claims impossible. The Liberty ships are mostly gone now, scrapped decades ago, or resting on ocean floors. But the revolution they represented endures in every modern shipyard, in every manufacturing facility that uses prefabrication, In every training program that teaches specific skills quickly rather than broad expertise slowly, and in every manager who questions whether impossible truly means impossible or simply means nobody has figured out how yet. That is Henry Kaiser's enduring legacy, carved not in steel but in transformed understanding of what dedicated people can accomplish when freed from the constraints of tradition and challenged to attempt what experts claim cannot be done. From December 1940, when he signed his first contract, knowing nothing about shipbuilding, to November 1942, when the Robert E. Peary launched after less than 5 days of construction, to September 1945, when the last Liberty ship was delivered, Kaiser proved that industrial revolutions happen not through incremental improvements, but through fundamental reimagining of what is possible. The 2,710 Liberty ships, built between 1941 and 1945, carried more than cargo across oceans. They carried proof that human ingenuity, when unshackled from tradition and empowered by necessity, can accomplish the seemingly impossible. They proved that ordinary people, given training and opportunity, could achieve extraordinary results. They demonstrated that complex products previously requiring years of craft tradition could be manufactured in weeks using systematized processes. They showed that industries resistant to change for centuries could be revolutionized in months when necessity and innovation combined. In the end, the greatest achievement was not the ships themselves, crucial though they were to Allied victory. The greatest achievement was what their construction proved about human capability and organizational possibility. That when experts say something cannot and be done, the right response is not acceptance, but questions. What assumptions are we making? What traditions are we following blindly? What would happen if we approached this problem from first principles? Henry Kaiser asked those questions about shipbuilding in 1940. The answers he discovered changed not just maritime construction, but the entire understanding of what industrial systems could achieve when properly designed and courageously implemented. The Liberty ships stand as testament to the power of that questioning spirit, the value of that outsider perspective, and the potential that lies dormant in every industry waiting for someone brave enough to ask why things must remain as they have always been. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel.